When is injury no longer an injury? Is it the lack of pain or is it the lack of conscious thought about the pain? If you think about it for a second, a lot of people measure them being better by not having pain. And that could be a good sign that you're improving. But also times we go back to the gym or jujitsu way too early and we're constantly thinking like, oh, am I in a bad position? Or, hey, he's doing this. I'm really nervous about that. And that to me tells me that you're no longer over an injury and you need to do other things to help yourself. Hey guys, I'm Dr. Josh Jagoda. I'm a sports rehab chiropractor and I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt. And of course, I've suffered my own injuries and I want to use this time in this video to help you understand the things that you can do and things to think about so that you can avoid jiu-jitsu injuries altogether. You know, there's a concept in the sports rehab and the sports medicine world saying that if the athlete or active individual doesn't expect to get injured, they shouldn't be there in the first place. This means that every single sport, it doesn't matter if it's jiu-jitsu, it doesn't matter if it's running, it doesn't matter if it's cycling, it doesn't matter if it's weight training, there's always going to be a risk and a reward, and every single sport has its inherent injuries. Some are just higher, like contact sports, and some are not as high. And so you just have to understand that there are always risks, there's always rewards. And if you don't expect that injuries are going to be playing a role in your life, whether that's from jiu-jitsu itself, from workplace, from lifting up your kids, from going traveling and tripping and falling, things happen in life and you have to expect that you are going to get injured, but you also have to expect that you have an opportunity to get back stronger and to recover from that injury. So understanding that there are risks and rewards are super important. So we have to understand that. In addition to the injuries, understanding the sport is going to be really important because the truth is that most people are white belts and blue belts that get injured. They tend to get injured at a higher rate at the beginning than other patients and other practitioners. Why? Because they are new to the sports, they are new to the movements, they don't understand the corrections that they need to make, they don't understand the positions, what's at risk, they spasm, they maybe don't use the right techniques. There are a whole host of other injuries that can happen. And this tends to happen also as a result of adaptation. Adaptation just means that if you haven't spent the weeks, months, or years on the mats and you're not used to the forces that are going into your rib cage and your hips, you may be at risk, especially if you're coming from a completely diverse or different background, that it's a new sport. It's a new movement pattern. You wouldn't expect somebody like myself to go out there and just run a marathon on a regular basis because I would develop some ankle pain, heel pain, Achilles pain, calf pain, and that would not be the best approach. And likewise for you, if you're new to jiu-jitsu or maybe you're coming back from an injury, it wouldn't be the best approach to go from 0 days a week to 5 days a week of hardcore aggressive training. As I mentioned before, bad positions, understanding the position is super important. And if you are new to an injury and you got over an injury or you're constantly going through an injury, you might actually do some research about that injury. So if you think about it, if somebody gets armbarred, they're going to look up how to recover from an armbar. That is an awesome strategy to get over the armbar. However, it brings more consciousness and effort to how to avoid the armbar itself. So as you get more injured, unfortunately, you learn more, but also as you learn more, you end up realizing how to avoid those injuries. So part of this video and part of practicing through jiu-jitsu is actually learning what not to do as well as what to do. And part of getting over injuries is actually learning what positions to avoid. Another major way that a lot of people get injured, as I always mention, is fatigue. Fatigue is a huge limiting factor. So this really just means that you need to become fatigue resilient. Practice a good base of cardio, do some anaerobic training, do some aerobic training, do some strength and conditioning, and do some other things, not just on the mat, but also the mat as well. Drills, mobility, all these other things. One thing I also talk to my patients about when it comes to jiu-jitsu is really understanding your breathing techniques and really understanding your mindset. The more calm you can likely be and the least emotionally charged you can be, aka the most neutral you can be, the better off you can be. So if you think about it, let's just say a guy accidentally knocks you into the nose. You get really angry about that. And maybe he doesn't even know he did it to you. And you get really upset. you're going to start turning up the dial, the intensity level higher and higher and higher. And so what are they going to do? They're going to counteract that intensity with your intensity. And before you know it, things are moving faster. You're getting more fatigued faster. Your heart rate's getting up. Your breathing is changing. And guess what happens? The reactionary time that it takes is diminished. And then now you're no longer going from rolling, but you're going from rolling to aggressively fighting. And that reaction time might be the difference between you hurting yourself or not hurting yourself. So keeping your emotions in check can actually save you if you know how to roll a little bit more favorably. So just understanding that keeping your heart rate, your emotions in check, and reducing your fatigue is going to be one of those big factors in jiu-jitsu. For many people, young and old, and there's been a really good movement, it's all about recovery and things that you can do. Recovery means sleep, nutrition, how you train, what are the modalities and things that you're doing off of the mats, not just on the mats, but right after the mats. Are you hydrating well? Are you eating well? Are you sleeping regularly? Like, what is going on? What's the quality as well as quantity? There are other factors, of course. We have all these fancy tools like the Normatec compression belts and tools and all these other things and myofascial release. These are all great modalities. So are you taking advantage of some of these modalities? Ice plunging. Are you just going for a walk? What can you do? How can you train up your programs? Are you strength and conditioning, as I've always mentioned, and we'll talk more about that. But I really believe that recovery is a huge factor. And of course, every athlete needs it. And some people recover a little faster, a little slower, and it changes with age. So those people who likely need more time, potentially those people over 40, so you really have to worry about that when it comes to aging, especially if you have a job to maintain. One major factor to overcoming injuries is actually not having injuries to begin with or overcoming your old injuries in its entirety. A lot of people have injuries. We all battle with something, and I hate to say that, but it's true. We all have some sort of injury. And if you don't overcome it to the best of your ability, I'm not saying you're going to be 100% or you're going to be 100% all the time, but I am saying if you think that just your pain goes away after 4 weeks of a major injury, and then right after that injury, you think you can just go right back on the mat 3, 4, 5 times a week at 100%, and you keep coming back with an injury or the same injury, you're probably not completely healing entirely. You need to make sure that you're not only recovering entirely, but that you're really overcoming that injury. And that might mean finding a professional, finding a rehab professional, doing some investigative work to really figure out what the root cause is and what the problem is. And before you return to those mats, again, do you have pain? Are you immobile? Do you have some other limiting factors that are going to contribute to this? And working through this while you still try to recover on the mat. So those are going to be a huge factor, is your past injuries. I cannot for the life of me figure out why people in jiu-jitsu, and even with my online patients, with my in-person patients, there are so many patients that just do not strength train. I really believe that you should be training at least 2 to 3 times a week. If you can't do 3 times a week, do 2. You don't have to do heavy weight. You don't have to do aggressive style training. But if you can get 2 days a week of upper and lower, aka full body workouts, 2 times a week for strength training, that would do you good. It's really going to help with your recovery because it's going to make sure your tendons, your ligaments, and everything else is strong. And I just don't understand why people who are doing jiu-jitsu are not strength training. I promise you it's going to help you. And I promise you that you're missing out if you're not doing it. So if you're not doing it right now, find somebody or find a partner, find a coach, find somebody who can help you get to the next level and at least build some strength so that you can maintain it. I promise you that the stronger you are off the mats, the more you can stay on those mats. Another thing that I like to talk about with my jiu-jitsu people is jiu-jitsu programming. How many days a week are you training? If you know every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday you're going to train, what does that training look like? Are you peaking for something? What are you trying to accomplish? Goals are important, but also you have to realize that not every single day you can go 100%. Most days it's going to be roughly about 80%. Remember the 80-20 principle. Can you do 80%? Can you do 30% one day? Can you focus on other aspects? Because if you constantly go 100%, 100%, 100%, that's going to be really detrimental. So let's come up with a very easy scenario to understand. Maybe on Mondays you do 80%. Maybe on Wednesday, you're going to do roughly 70 or 60%, and you're going to work a lot more technically. And then maybe on Fridays, you're going to peak that a little bit to 90%. You can't just constantly go 100%, 100%, 100%. And you can't always just go super low. Otherwise, you may not be getting the real live reactions that you really need. So you might have to alter those percentages where you're doing 50% one day, 80% another day, maybe 90% another day. Yeah, there's going to be peaks and valleys, but you have to go in there and do jiu-jitsu with an intention. And if you're trying to add more days to the week, for example, maybe on that third or fourth day that you're trying to add, maybe you go back in there at 50 or 60%. You gotta understand that the alternation between gas and brake is going to have to always be dynamically changing. Think about it like driving a car. If you are constantly throttling, aka going forward, then you're gonna really have some issues when you come to stoplights as well as traffic patterns. But you kind of have to oscillate that brake and that pedal all the time to adjust for your body and as well as the environmental conditions of how you feel. So you need to take an internal look of how you feel, how you're performing, and make those changes accordingly and on a week by week basis. But understand the program in which you're going to train really, really hard is going to have to change. And you got to remember, jiu-jitsu is a skill-based training system. Be mindful and take jiu-jitsu as a technique-based approach, but with all those other components of mobility, strength, conditioning, and aerobic, anaerobic capacity, and all these other factors. Big factor for jiu-jitsu is rolling with certain people that you don't know or rolling with people that you know you can trust. Of course, the people that you can trust is great, but there are times where you roll with people you don't know, and there are times where you're rolling with people you do know, but they don't know that they are causing you issues, right? And you really just have to make the determination. You can always say no. It doesn't matter if you're a black belt. It doesn't matter if you're a white belt. If somebody doesn't want to roll with you, or if you don't want to roll with somebody, that is totally okay. You don't owe anybody anything, and they don't owe you anything. You're there together mutually by option, not because somebody forced you to be there, because you want to be there. And if you don't feel like rolling, you don't have to. Even if you're injured, if you're feeling good, if you're not feeling good, if you need to be pushed to the next level, that's a different story. But if you feel like you're not ready because of an injury, or you're just tired and you feel like you're fatigued and you're going to risk an injury, you don't owe anybody anything. So knowing who you're going to roll with in terms of skill set, in terms of where you are, what your goals are, techniques, all these other factors are a major, major contribution to longevity on those mats. So at the end of the day, it's really just about you and your injuries. And I want you to really be focused on what you can accomplish to overcome your injuries. Look yourself in the mirror. What deficits do you have? You have to live with them, nobody else. What hip immobility do you have? What back pain are you kind of avoiding? All these other factors, all these things that you know you have to deal with. And believe me, we all have something to deal with. I can promise you, we all have deficits. But if you know that one deficit or two deficits are really keeping you from feeling well and rolling well, then it's time for you to really figure out and look in the mirror and actually fix those things. It doesn't matter, again, if you need a practitioner, a PT, a chiro, somebody to help you on your side, that is totally okay. But at the end of the day, you have to live with your skill set and you have to live with your injuries, nobody else. So time to take a good look in the mirror. What areas can you improve? What other areas can you fix? So I'd be really interested, guys. Leave in the comments, what is your biggest takeaway and what is the biggest thing that you struggle with in jiu-jitsu? Looking forward to seeing you guys on the mats. Boost.